this answer is okay.
Thank you very much. I'll pass the floor back to the United Kingdom.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have also a question for Canada. We touched on this a little while ago, the very impressive project to research Indigenous names. And I wondered if there was a record of the names that have been changed, for instance, in Nunavut. I know that there are some name changes that have been made to restore or to acknowledge the indigenous name as the main name, and I wondered if there was a full list of these available. Thanks.
I will invite the delegate from Canada to respond.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much for the question. Yes, certainly we would be able to extract from the national database the changes of names from colonial names to indigenous origin names. But I think it's important to note that this is an ongoing process, and many new names are approved as indigenous names right from the get-go, essentially, and they're not changes from former colonial names. For example, in the past year, we've approved, the Geographical Names Board, the provinces and territories have approved approximately 200 names that are indigenous origin, indigenous language names. I don't have a figure for how many replacement names there are, but right across the country, in Nunavut, in Quebec, in all of our provinces and territories, there are efforts underway to approve new indigenous names. Thank you. I hope that answer was good.
Thank you. I'll go back to the United Kingdom.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have one final question, if I may, for Russia. There was a description in your paper about the transfer of names in the republics. For instance, the Republic of Tatarstan and a number of other republics were recorded. And I wondered if you could explain for us precisely what this meant. Does it mean the collection is made in local languages and then a transfer into Russian, some form of Russianification, as it were? Thank you.
If I can invite the Russian Federation to respond, please.
Thank you for the question. I shall answer in Russian.
In the Russian Federation, the state language is Russian, and the geographical names in official databases are contained in Russian. But by using geographical names, there were organizations and citizens, including those in the national republics. They proposed these names in their national languages, and then they go through a verification process. And then if they receive a positive result, then they are transliterated into the Russian language. This is the Russification that you were speaking of. And then they are included with this description in Russian, in the Russian alphabet as the national names. I hope that's a clear answer for your question.
Thank you for that, and that concludes the question that the United Kingdom has. If I can now go back to Canada to allow Canada to ask the questions that they have, then we will have France thereafter. I pass the floor to the Canadian delegation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've got 4 questions here, although I think perhaps only 3 people are present, so it may turn out to be 3. The first one is for the Philippines, and I would like to say what gracious hosts they were to an Angegan training course last year, and congratulate them on that, first of all. Now, the question I have, the Philippine Committee on Geographical Names, I understand, was deactivated in 1973, so there is no official committee to oversee standardization of geographical names. But in your report, you say some agencies do continue with this. And I wondered if it would be possible for you to perhaps say a little bit more on that. Does that mean transportation might make names for their own use, or what sort of names would this apply to? And what is the status now of reactivating the PCGN, the Philippines Committee? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I will give the chair to our delegate from the Philippines.
Thank you for your questions, and thank you for acknowledging the ongoing proposal to revive the Philippine Committee on Geographical Names. However, our experts are not present here, and we would refer your questions to them for answers. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I pass the floor back to Canada for their next question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My second question was for Denmark. And certainly their comments in the report show the strong link and cooperation between the University of Copenhagen, the names research, and the place name section of the National Mapping and Surveying Authority. And clearly this is a very beneficial sort of structure that other countries might, might benefit if they followed such an organization. But I wondered if I can ask two questions. One is, could you just clarify for me which other government departments would be on the board that approves the names of places other than University of Copenhagen and the National Mapping and Surveying Authority? And second, you talk about Greenland and Faroe Islands, and they have their own geographical names commissions. Now, do they have academic advice within their own realms, or is it the University of Copenhagen that does provide linguistic advice to them? Thank you.
I invite the delegate from Denmark to respond to that question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to answer the second question first. To my knowledge, everything that has to do with the Greenlandic and Faroese situation is their concern only. At least the University of Copenhagen do not interfere or have an opinion. And I think that the first question about who is represented in the Danish Place Name Committee, that would be statistics, the church, the cultural ministry, who else? I should have prepared a list. Yes, the postal service and the statistics. I said the statistics. Yes. Department of Natural Resources. I think that's all. I think I got them all. Otherwise, ask me again.
Thank you very much from our colleague from Denmark. I return the floor to Canada. I think this is your final question.
Well, I have two, but one participant may not be here.
Right.
Sure. The next one is for Vietnam. Also, they participated in the training in the Philippines and are now standardizing geographical names in 5 provinces, providing training courses to their technical staff. And one thing that I saw in the report, I wondered if you could elaborate a little bit, they're organizing the local conference to verify the results of standardization of geographical names.